Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Hands of Egypt. A team of archaeologists in Egypt discovered something exceptionally gruesome near the ancient city of Avaris. They found a series of 4 pits containing severed human hands. 2 of these pits were found in front of what had once been a throne room, with 1 human hand in each. The 2 other pits were unearthed at the edges of the old palace, containing a total of 14 human hands between them. And to really make things that much stranger, there were no left hands at all, only right hands. Manfred Beitak, the project leader, told Life Science that most of the hands are also abnormally large, which seems to make no sense at all. So what could be the meaning of burying several disembodied, larger than average right hands? Even more interesting is the fact that the hands date back to 3,600 years ago, to the days when the Hyksos, descended from northern Canaan, controlled most of Egypt. Their capital was at Avaris, known today as Tel El Daba. These hands were buried at a time when King Kayan ruled over the city. Amazingly, archaeologists have a fairly good idea of why these hands were left here. It looks to be the first real evidence of a practice only heard of until now in ancient Egyptian writing. A soldier would present the severed right hand of their enemy to the king in exchange for gold. It was a symbolic gesture, with the Egyptian warrior depriving their enemy of power by stealing their hand. Getting gold for the gruesome exchange was just a bonus. Number 9. Neanderthal Cannibals. 40,000 years ago, people in Belgium were practicing cannibalism. However, in this case, the people weren't humans as we know them today, but rather one of our many groups of hominid ancestors. The culprits in this case are the Neanderthals, ancient humans who made meals of their own kind, and then even made tools out of their bones. This terrifying revelation was made thanks to a discovery in a cave, where scientists found the bones of old Neanderthals with the marks of butchery. In other words, knife markings on the bones of Neanderthals show that they were cut apart by their own kind. It's possible this practice had a hand in their extinction about 30,000 years ago. According to the lead scientist in this troubling discovery, Professor Hervé Bockerens, evidence shows that whatever happened here was a thorough process. 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals would skin other Neanderthals just as they would skin animals. They would then cut them into pieces and even extract their bone marrow for eating. The professor went on to say all this evidence suggests some serious cannibalism was going on in the caves of the old world. The remains of horses and reindeer found inside the same Belgian cave were processed in the exact same way as the human remains. For these Neanderthals, there seemed to be no distinction between man and animal. And in case you weren't convinced, scientists say there were also some recent findings in Spain and France that showed evidence of the same behaviors. Neanderthals, no matter where they lived in Europe, almost always in a cave somewhere, seem to have more in common with Hannibal Lecter than the common person of today. Number 8. Cave Outlaw. Speaking of creepy things found in caves, a dead body discovered in the Civil Defense Caves near Du Bois in Idaho has finally been identified. Body parts were first discovered in this cave back in 1979, then again in 1991. But the dead person was never identified until just now. He only dates from about 100 years ago, but his story is still pretty fascinating. He was a notorious outlaw last seen alive in the year 1916, and from what we can tell by the evidence, he wasn't exactly the most brilliant outlaw of the day. The caves themselves were formed by lava running through the rock millions of years ago. Now, these caves are popular for hikers in the region to go with their dogs on a day of adventure. But 100 years ago, the caves weren't used for anything. They would have been completely empty, which would have made them a perfect place for the outlaw Joseph Henry Lovelace to hide. Scientists figured out his name by doing DNA testing and genealogical research. Joseph was born in 1870. After he married his second wife, Agnes Octavia, they had 4 children together. Unfortunately for Agnes, he seemed to have misunderstood until death do us part and murdered his wife in cold blood in 1916. He was caught bootlegging liquor and was sent to jail, but somehow escaped. We don't know exactly what happened to him after his escape, but archaeologists are pretty sure he was murdered. While it may have seemed as though he was hiding out in the caves, they say the fact that Lovelace's head was never found means he was likely killed and then dumped in the cave afterwards. What do you think? Murder? Wild animal attack? Whatever the truth is, he came to some kind of bad end in those caves. Number 7. Tutankhamun's death mask. One of the creepiest things ever found in archaeological history is the death mask of Tutankhamun. It's definitely the most recognizable of any treasure taken out of the boy pharaoh's tomb. And as we know, the Egyptians were both obsessed and fascinated with death. From mummification to the afterlife, ancient Egyptian culture was thorough in their death practices and preparations, and this is where the death mask comes from. The death mask was detailed with the facial features of the deceased and then put over their face in the coffin. The mask was supposed to help guide the soul of the dead back to where their physical body was buried, and if anything ever happened to the corpse, the mask would be a safe place for the soul to hide. It's all kind of bizarre, especially the face on the death mask. According to historian Dan Snow, the Egyptians made an idealized portrait of their ruler in what he calls the Instagram face. The face would be made to look its best and covered in gold metal. That way it could last forever. And in the case of Tutankhamun, his mask certainly did last forever. It's currently sitting in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and is one of the most recognizable relics in the world. Number 6. A severed head. In Brazil, a severed head was discovered complete with a set of amputated hands buried in the dirt some 9,000 years ago. To understand why a severed head was found in the dirt, keep in mind that when the European colonizers arrived in South America, the natives widely practiced body mutilation. They cut off heads and displayed them, sacrificed people to their gods, and did all kinds of other seemingly barbaric and terrible things. The oldest decapitation ever found in South America, before this one, dated back 3,000 years and was found in Peru. Until recently, archaeologists had speculated that decapitations were mostly done in that part of the continent. But this newest discovery at the site of Lapa do Santo in Brazil shows evidence of human occupation going back 12,000 years. Rock shelters here could have been used by some of the earliest human beings to ever step foot in South America. Back in 2007, researchers discovered pieces of a buried human body here in the rocks. The head had been cut off, along with the hands, and then the hands placed over the face to cover each eye. It was a very ghoulish thing to discover, though maybe not as sinister as it looks. Experts say it was probably some kind of ritual decapitation, rather than the decapitation of an enemy to humiliate them. Number 5. The mummy with the golden tongue. While archaeologists were excavating some ancient graves at the site of Tabosiris Magna in Egypt, they discovered a mummy buried with a golden tongue from 2,000 years ago. According to the professionals, the golden tongue had likely been a tool so that the dead person could speak to the gods in the afterlife. At least, this is what the Egyptian Antiquities Ministry said in an official statement after the discovery was made. They believe the individual buried here may have had speaking difficulties in life. They may have been a mute, had a stutter, or possibly some kind of affliction that would make speech a challenge. By giving them a golden tongue after death, people believed it would have allowed them to speak with Osiris, the god of the underworld. But this still leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions. For example, why would the tongue have to be made specifically from gold? We know today that gold is a great conductor of electricity, but it seems like the ancient Egyptians thought gold was also a great conductor of the voice, from a corpse all the way into the afterlife. And now for number 4, but first it's shoutout time! Big thank you to Brandy Hines and Aisha Cupido. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because we have lots more archaeological discoveries coming up. Number 4. The cemetery beneath Cambridge. An Anglo-Saxon burial ground was found beneath the University of Cambridge. It wasn't found literally underneath the school, but under a plot of land that's being turned into an accommodation block for students. It was when construction started that workers began to find human bones and realized they were dealing with a medieval cemetery. So far, excavations have revealed at least 60 graves dating back to between 400 and 650 AD, or around the same time as the Sutton Hoo site. Many of the graves contain interesting artifacts like pieces of brass jewelry, glass flasks, rusted weapons, and smashed chunks of pottery. Dr. Caroline Goodson, a Cambridge University lecturer, says the excavation of the cemetery has been an amazing opportunity to look into the past of Britain, including how life was changing at the end of the Roman period. The cemetery was used in the centuries following the fall of Rome, then onward until perhaps the 7th century. But what surprised archaeologists the most was that all these graves had been hiding underneath modern houses in the 20th century, and no one had a clue. The people who had lived in the homes over the cemetery had quite literally been sleeping over the bones of roughly 60 people without the slightest indication or knowledge. Would you want to know if your house was built on top of an ancient cemetery? Let me know in the comments below. Number 3. The Huldremos woman. The Huldremos woman is one of the best preserved bog bodies that has ever been discovered. She's also, without a doubt, the very best dressed bog body ever found. She was discovered back in 1879 by a school teacher in Denmark who was digging peat turf. He dug the woman's body out of the muck, and she became a scientific marvel. Out of the more than 500 bodies discovered in peat bogs throughout Denmark, buried between 800 BC and 200 AD, she is perhaps the most remarkable. From what we know today, the Huldremos woman died in her 40s, sometime between the year 160 BC and 340 AD. Back then, living past 40 was quite impressive. But what's even more impressive is that the woman was found fully dressed in some beautiful examples of Iron Age clothing from Northern Europe and Scandinavia. She had on a woolen skirt, woolen scarf, and 2 capes of animal skin. She was quite fashionable back then, even wrapped in a fur coat made from the skin of 14 sheep. Analysis has shown that her skirt, capes, and coat would have been different colors, suggesting Iron Age people were much more colorful than we give them credit for today. This surprising information makes you wonder how many other historical periods may have been more colorful or vibrant than we imagined. Number 2. A Mesolithic sanctuary. A very strange sanctuary from the Mesolithic period, about 9,000 years ago, has been discovered by archaeologists in Poland, specifically in Western Pomerania by archaeologists with the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnology in Szczecin. A whole heap of bizarre artifacts has been found here, including an ancient hut that contained a fragment from a meteorite. Archaeologists also found what would have been regarded as a magical staff made from antlers and decorated with bizarre motifs, and a bone spear engraved with strange symbols. All this evidence point to this strange sanctuary being a place where the ancient inhabitants engaged in their ritual ceremonies. We don't know what exactly went on here in terms of religious activity, but the researchers are pretty certain the whole area was ruled over by shamans. With the meteorite fragment, some bundles of pine, birch, grass, and bone, as well as other ritual items, this was clearly a ceremonial hub. Rituals probably pertained primarily to astronomy, having to do with the stars and the constellations, but the exact truth of what happened in this mysterious place is still unknown. Number 1. The tree graves of Indonesia. Deep in the jungles of Indonesia, in the remote and mountainous region of South Sulawesi, you can find the bodies of babies buried inside the trunks of living trees. This amazing ritual has been going on for centuries, with the villagers here literally entombing their deceased young ones inside of living plants. The reason they do it is so that the young soul can be absorbed back into nature. By carving a hole in a massive tree trunk, then wrapping the infant in cloth and placing them gently inside, the villagers believe that their body and their spirit will coalesce with nature. While this might seem scary and even disturbing on the outside, it's actually quite peaceful. The villagers here say that the wind will carry away the soul of the infant, while the body will become one with the tree. In just a single tree, you can find dozens of babies interred in little cubbyholes, locked inside the trunk and sealed by small wooden doors. But this isn't done for every small child, only for those so young that they haven't started teething yet. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite discovery? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!